Hi, I'm Tom, and this is Villanova News. We start tonight with a special report on a growing problem in our nation and throughout the world: homelessness. In Philadelphia alone, at any given time, we have at least 650 people living on the streets and close to 12,000 people living in shelters. Philadelphia also has one of the highest poverty rates in the nation, 27%. For more on this story, we go to our field reporter, Jimmy. Jimmy, can you tell us more about homelessness throughout the U.S. and the world?
Tom, homelessness is a major problem. A study showed that on any given night, over 610,000 people were homeless across the United States. 65% were either living in shelters or transitional homes, and 35% were living in unsheltered locations. 23% of all homeless people were children on any given night. That's over 138,000 children. Major cities accounted for 45% of all homeless people. 388,000, or 64% of all homeless people in the U.S., were living by themselves, and 2,200,000 living with family on any single given night in 2013. 58% of all homeless people living in families were children. That is close to 131,000 children. On a single night in 2013, 109,000 people were chronically homeless. There were 58,000 veterans homeless on a single night in 2013. 60% were located in shelters or transitional programs, nutritional housing programs, and 40% were in unsheltered locations. There were 47,000 unaccompanied homeless children and youth on any given night in 2013. 87% were between the ages of 18 and 24, and 13%, or 6,000, were under the age of 18. Half of those children lived in unsheltered locations. Homelessness isn't just a problem in the U.S. though, Tom. An estimated 100 million people are homeless worldwide, and an additional 1.6 billion living without adequate housing. 3 million people are homeless in Europe, and 100,000 people sleep on the streets of Australia every night. In Brazil, there's an estimated 20 million homeless people, most of which live in favelas or slums. In 2003, there were an estimated 78 million homeless people in India. Tom, back to you.
Thanks, Jimmy. California is actually the state with the highest homelessness population, with 114,000 people. And in this fiscal year, the U.S. federal government will spend an estimated $5 billion, with another $5.7 billion estimated to be spent in the next fiscal year. And now over to our field reporter, Dan, with the causes of homelessness.
It's a common misconception that the majority of the homeless population is suffering from physical or mental disability. In fact, that's far from the truth. One of the 3.5 million people who experience homelessness in the United States every year are children. Often when a family or individual is forced into homelessness, it is due to some unexpected or sudden event which changes their lives. This can be something as simple as a car breaking down when they have no money to pay for repairs. The loss of transportation results in a loss of employment, which drives the family into homelessness. Many everyday tragic events can move a family from poverty to homelessness. The death of a provider, or temporary unemployment can have a catastrophic effect on a family which is already on the brink of insolvency. Poverty is, in a way, the main contributor to homelessness. What would be a small everyday occurrence to a well-off family might be enough to push an impoverished family over the brink into homelessness. The loss of financial security is a tragedy in and of itself. But what makes homelessness such an issue is the cascade of new problems which arise when a person loses everything. Poor sanitation and diet prevent individuals from getting or keeping even the lowest paying jobs. The powerful lure of addiction and crime make returning to a normal life even more difficult. Of course, we cannot ignore that an estimated 1 in 5 homeless people suffer from some sort of mental illness. Whether this is severe schizophrenia or simply clinical depression, these people have the hardest time returning to a mainstream life, as they require much more assistance than normal. Many shelters require that applicants are sober and somewhat stable before they enter, but those suffering from mental illness tend to self-medicate with drugs and alcohol, making sobriety all but impossible.
Thanks, Dan. The situation of homelessness could truly happen to anyone. But what can be done to help those people in need? To answer that question, we turn to our special correspondent, Mike.
There are many possible solutions to homelessness. Housing assistance can be given to those who are living on the streets with programs such as federal housing vouchers. These vouchers allow low-income families to rent modest market rate housing of their choice and provide subsidies which adjust relative to the family's income over time. Also, Housing First is an approach to homelessness which involves moving homeless individuals, the majority of whom have mental illness, go through substance abuse, or have some other serious health problems, into subsidized housing and provide them with support services. Research has shown that homeless people who move into housing first apartments remain stably housed and have significantly improved their health problems. A short-term solution is to provide temporary shelter for the homeless. Providing temporary shelter can be a matter of life and death for the homeless, as many homeless people have died from hypothermia or other cold-related injuries. This also allows them to regain stability and seek permanent housing. It is also important to find ways to prevent homelessness from occurring in the first place, especially since it is becoming more and more difficult for low-income families to avoid eviction because of rising rent prices. Eviction prevention grants help tenants at risk of becoming homeless pay back rent and remain in their apartments. Also, legal services can be provided to low-income tenants who are facing eviction and cannot afford legal services.
Thanks, Mike. We can all do something to put an end to this tragic situation. This has been a special report on homelessness. Once again, I'm Tom, and this has been Villanova News. Thanks for watching, and good night.